Hi. This morning I was asking Charlie, what shall I talk about? What would you like me to talk about? And to my complete and utter surprise, he said, I want you to talk about the past. Okay. So, where are we going here? And we go back around 10,000 years back. We're going back to the end of Atlantis. This is the absolute end of the civilization of Atlantis. So a little background here. To begin with, Atlantis was a civilization that existed up to the end of the last cataclysm, and it was a very successful and spiritual civilization. It wasn't mechanically successful because they didn't. What we've got now is we're totally divorced from nature. They lived within nature, but nevertheless they were very successful, and they had huge understanding and knowledge of the human being, what makes us tick. They're the ones who have brought acupuncture to us. They're the ones who brought yoga to us. They understood the science of the body. Anyway, so after the cataclysm, or should I say preceding the cataclysm, there were a number of seers who had foreseen what was to come, and about 1 million of the Atlanteans did manage to go to a safe place, and they're the ones who survived the previous death and destruction. Anyway, this new satellite of the Atlantean civilization, which was around what today we would call Turkey, Russia area, just there, Georgia. They did actually moved all the way around the basin, the edge of the Mediterranean as it was there. They were explorers, but they survived for about 1,500 or so years, and again they were very successful. Their civilization recovered, and at the end of this there was the floods, and that is the point at which my previous incarnation comes in. I was a seer in a small village, if you could. We lived in stone houses. It was quite warm, and we survived through fishing, and we grew some wheat as it was at the time, and we pretty much survived on goats. So that was the bulk of our diet, us in our village where we were. The village were not all stuck together. There was plenty of room, so they were sort of separated. I don't know, each house may have had something like around how would you say, half an acre, something like that, within the village proper. But there were fields around, and they were all communal. And all of this was done, people took it in turns to help in different things. So it was a bit like the Hamish, it was a collective. Everybody worked together. But they didn't have individual farms. It was all done for the group. We were closer to 300 people within the village. And the teenagers were the ones who had the job of going out with the goats and looking after at that level. Anyway, I mean, it's not really that relevant, but it's interesting. And my job was a seer, and I helped people with what today people call acupuncture, but it was actually acupressure, knowing which points to touch when anyone had some sort of traumatic experience. So my job was to help people through their traumatic experiences. Bear in mind that this was a time when the God energy was still full on this earth. And so spiritually people were pretty connected, pretty well put together. I've spoken before in other videos about the connection between ego and the soul, and my particular connection at the time was around 55. So I already had about quite a good integration with my soul, which is what made it easier for me to work with my higher faculties. The village was more around the 40s. So their ego-soul integration was around the 40s. If you compare that with today, where the majority of people are at around 20%, they were very, very together, and there was a lot of connection with their soul and connection with their heart. People were nice, and people were well-meaning, and people took care of each other in a way that we don't today, not really. So my job, I mean, I still had to help with the fields. I still had to do my quota of fishing. But that was my hobby horse. So that's the bit that I did. Everybody had a little hobby horse. That was mine. That's how I helped. So the moment came when I had a premonition. Something bad was about to happen. And this premonition coincided with the Kali Yuga energy. It's like the light was full on, and then suddenly all the lights came off. Suddenly we were in darkness. And within my premonition, that happened 2 days before the lights went out. For 1 day, I kept the premonition to myself as I deliberated what it meant. The second day, I shared it with my family. And the third day, the lights were out. The impact on me was to panic. Suddenly, I was in a state of fear. It was the dark night of the soul. Why hast thou forsaken me? I felt cut off in a way which I'd never experienced before. But I still knew, I still felt that something really bad is going to happen and that I needed to go up into the mountains. And that became an imperative. And that very night, my wife and 2 children, my children by this time, they were around 19 and 21, a boy and a girl. The girl was the oldest. And that very night we packed up and we left. We left the village with whatever we could carry. We had something, the equivalent of mules, and we just went up the mountain. Within a day of our journey, the sky was completely black and the downpour began. It wasn't just rain, there were heavy droplets of water coming down. And we found a place to shelter, and as soon as the rain abated somewhat, we continued climbing. This went on for about 3 days. There were moments when the sky cleared up somewhat and we could see that there were rivers of mud coming down from the mountains. The village had already been the water had risen way beyond the village by then. It happened quite quickly. The initial downpour, which wasn't just our village, it was everywhere. It rose the waters by a good 100 feet within those first few days. By the time we'd reached a place that we thought we could stay here and we could make a life, the waters had risen even higher, and whatever life we had known, it disappeared. It continued to rain intermittently for quite a while. So we, as a family, we had slings. We were pretty good with slings. We could shoot anything with slings. And we found it quite easy to go and kill animal life, of which there was more than enough. The animals had run away straight away. They knew what was coming, and they'd all gone for the high ground. So life was aplenty. That wasn't a problem. And we were able to create craft and go fishing. So we could, fishing wasn't an issue for us, so we could get food that way as well. And we survived. Eventually, my children explored around the area, and we did come across other survivors. and it was a very loose framework, but it was never the same. Now we were suspicious of each other. That love that existed in our culture before the deluge, that was gone. Some of the knowledge clearly survived and was used to take, it was then taken to other places. We did survive. It wasn't just my village around Turkey, what today we would call Turkey. It wasn't my village. It wasn't just me that survived, although we were the only ones from our village to survive. But there were villages all around the Med, and clearly there were enough people that survived for civilization to restart all over again. So that was my life. The bitter end of the previous Atlantean civilization and the darkness that engulfed all who followed and continued to the beginning of this year, 2025. If you're curious, my death wasn't very nice. After 15 years, I was racked with guilt. I was in part responsible for the death of my village. I did not go and alert them. If I had gone that first day and told everyone this is what we have to do, they would have listened to me, because I was trusted. So gradually over the 15 years, my heart closed more and more. My guilt racked me more and more. My self-disgust got greater and greater. Bear in mind that now we were under the clouds of the Kali Yuga, and I was susceptible to the darkness. And so I just gradually descended into self-hate. And after 15 years, I took my own life. I put something through my heart. I'm still trying to work out what it was. It was some sort of metal, but it wasn't a sword, it wasn't a knife. But it was some sort of metal. That's as close as I can get to it at the moment. We didn't have the technology in any meaningful way, certainly not in my village, to create metal. Metal did exist, and it was used with large glass magnifying lenses, and they were used to bring stones together, keep them in line. But we didn't have the technology in my village. We knew of it, we just didn't have it ourselves. But there was a metal up there that I used. It was already up there. It was already up at this height. We must have climbed about 400 feet up from the village or thereabouts. But I found some metal there. I don't know where it came from. And it was flat, and it was rectangular in shape. It wasn't very big. Anyway, that's what I used. And that's the most information I can get on the subject. But anyway, I used it to kill myself. And as a result of that, I'm still here. Karma is a bitch. So I've come full circle. As a job, if you like, what I had to do was alert the village. I had the gift, and I didn't do so. And I couldn't forgive myself. And so my soul fragment was trapped on this earth, was trapped in the darkness. And my next memory is 9,000 years later, is 1100 years ago. So that is my next incarnation that I have any memory of. And here I am today for succeeding. No, actually it's 5 in total. So that's 3 succeeding to the present. So this is my last incarnation. And like I say, I have come full circle. So once more, I'm here as a herald, foretelling of what's to come. Only this time, I'm not keeping it to myself. And I'm sharing it with those of you who can hear me. Bye for now.